There is something that almost no one wants to face. Something simple, yet extremely powerful. Something that separates people who spend their lives struggling financially from those who build real wealth over time. Curiously, it is not a lack of opportunity. It is also not a lack of intelligence. And most of the time, it is not even a lack of money. The real problem is something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Responsibility. Andrew Carnegie, one of the richest men in history, who came from extremely poor childhood and built an empire in the steel industry, used to say that there is a decisive moment in every person's life. A silent moment, almost invisible, but one that defines their entire future. It is the moment when you stop blaming circumstances and begin to take full control of your own life. Carnegie deeply believed that the greatest prison for a human being is not the lack of resources. The greatest prison is the victim mentality. As long as a person believes that the government, their boss, the economy, their family, or luck are responsible for their financial situation, they remain trapped. Because if the problem is outside of you, then the power is also outside of you. And that means you have no control. But when a person decides to take full responsibility for their life, something extraordinary happens. They regain their power. Now think honestly. How many times have you heard someone say things like, "If I had been born into a rich family, my life would be different. If my country were better, I would be financially successful. If my boss paid me more, I could grow. If I had more opportunities." But Andrew Carnegie proved the exact opposite. He was born in Scotland into an extremely poor family. His father was a weaver who lost his job when the Industrial Revolution arrived. The family went hungry. Literally hungry. When Carnegie was only 12 years old, he began working in a cotton factory. He worked about 12 hours a day. No privileges. No formal education. No powerful connections. But there was one fundamental difference. He decided not to accept reality as something permanent. He began to educate himself. He read everything he could. He observed businessmen. He learned about investing. He understood how money really worked. And a quote often attributed to him perfectly summarizes his philosophy. The first person to be transformed when you decide to become wealthy is yourself. This means wealth does not begin in a bank account. Wealth begins in the mind. Before any financial change happens in your life, something must change within you. And here is the part many people avoid hearing. Because changing your mindset requires something uncomfortable. Discipline, self-criticism, and above all, abandoning excuses. There is a question that few people have the courage to ask themselves. If my financial life hasn't changed until now, what exactly am I doing that keeps it the same? This question is powerful, but it is also uncomfortable. Because it removes every external justification. Suddenly you realize that maybe the problem is not the economy. Maybe the problem is that you never studied money. Maybe you work hard, but never learned how to invest. Maybe you earn money, but spend it all trying to maintain the appearance of success. Maybe you wait for motivation, when in reality what changes lives is consistency. Andrew Carnegie observed something that remains true even today. Most people want the results of discipline without living with discipline. They want financial freedom, but avoid learning about finances. They want prosperity, but run away from difficult decisions. They want success, but feel uncomfortable when they have to change habits. And here is a simple reality. As long as you keep avoiding what needs to be done, your life will remain exactly the same. Imagine two people with the same income. The first spends everything they earn, buys things to impress people, lies waiting for the next race. The second begins studying investments, learns about assets, controls expenses, invests consistently. 5 years later, the difference between these two people can be enormous. Not because one of them got lucky, but because one decided to face what most people avoid. Responsibility. Another powerful lesson from Andrew Carnegie is that wealth is not born from isolated big decisions. It is born from small decisions repeated every day. The way you use your time, the way you use your money, the way you react to difficulties. All of this slowly builds the future you will have. Carnegie also spoke about something many people completely ignore. Environment. He believed that the environment you live in deeply influences your financial mindset. If you spend most of your time with people who complain about life, criticize those who succeed, and believe wealth is impossible, over time, you begin to think the same way. But if you surround yourself with people who study, grow, invest, and believe in building something greater, your worldview changes. And when your worldview changes, your decisions change too. Now let me ask you a direct question. How many hours per week do you dedicate to learning something that could change your financial life? I'm not talking about entertainment. I'm talking about real study. Books about finance, learning about investments, developing new skills, understanding how to create value in the market. Most people spend more time scrolling through social media than building their own future. And this does not happen because of a lack of ability. It happens because growth requires effort. It requires discipline. It requires leaving the comfort zone. Andrew Carnegie believed that wealth is a consequence of value. The more value you create for the world, the greater your financial reward tends to be. But to create value, you must constantly evolve. You must learn new things. You must develop rare skills. You must think differently from the majority. And this is exactly where many people stop. Because growth requires patience. Financial results rarely happen overnight. But one thing is certain. When you begin to change your mindset, your decisions, and your habits, something slowly begins to happen. Small improvements start to appear. New opportunities emerge. Your worldview expands. And what once seemed impossible begins to seem inevitable. But everything begins with a simple decision. To stop avoiding what needs to be done. To take full responsibility for your own life. And to understand that, as Andrew Carnegie believed, the real turning point in a person's life happens when they stop waiting for change and start building it. And perhaps the most important question you can ask today is this. If nothing changes in your mindset, your habits, and your decisions, where will your financial life be in 5 years? That question may seem simple. But for those who have the courage to answer it honestly, it can change everything. Now imagine the following scenario. 5 years from now, you wake up in exactly the same financial situation you are in today. The same income. The same worries. The same frustrations. Nothing has changed. Now ask yourself honestly, did this happen because you didn't have opportunities or because you kept repeating exactly the same habits? Andrew Carnegie said something very direct about this. People who fail to advance financially rarely fail because of lack of ability. They fail because they never change their decisions. This means that most financial lives are not built by big mistakes. They are built by small choices repeated every single day. Choosing to spend instead of investing. Choosing distraction instead of learning. Choosing comfort instead of discipline. These choices seem small in the moment, almost insignificant. But over the years, they accumulate. And they create two completely different life paths. There was something Carnegie constantly observed among successful businessmen of his time. They didn't wait for motivation. They created systems. While many people wait to feel like studying, working, or improving, disciplined people simply do what needs to be done. Even without motivation. Even without recognition. Even without immediate results. Because they understand something most people ignore. Great results almost always come from invisible processes. For months, sometimes years, it seems like nothing is happening. But in reality, something is being built silently. Knowledge, skill, mindset, network. All of this begins to accumulate until, at some point, the results appear. And when they appear, many people call it luck. But Carnegie knew it was not luck. It was preparation meeting opportunity. Another fundamental point he defended is that most people have a destructive emotional relationship with money. Money becomes something filled with fear, guilt, or insecurity. Some people are afraid to invest. Others are afraid of earning more than the people around them. Others unconsciously believe that wealth is something negative. But Carnegie believed that money is simply a tool, a powerful tool. When used wisely, it creates freedom. Freedom of choice. Freedom of time. Freedom to help other people. But when ignored or misunderstood, it creates dependence and stagnation. Now think about something curious. In school, we spend years learning mathematics, history, geography, but almost no one teaches us how money actually works. We are not taught about investing. We are not taught about assets. We are not taught about financial mindset. And because of that, many people enter adulthood repeating patterns they never questioned. They work hard. They earn money. They spend everything. Then start over the next month. For decades, Andrew Carnegie observed this and said the first step to breaking this cycle is financial education. But not only technical education, mental education, understanding how wealthy people think, understanding how they make decisions, understanding how they view time, risk, and opportunity. Because the truth is that wealth is rarely an accident. It is built through strategic thinking. Carnegie also spoke a lot about the importance of defining a clear objective. He believed that one of the biggest reasons many people never prosper is because they live without financial direction. They work. They pay bills. They survive. But they never stop to ask, what exactly do I want to build financially? Without a clear objective, any path seems acceptable. But when a person defines a concrete goal, something changes. Their decisions begin to align. Their habits begin to organize. Their focus increases. Imagine someone who decides they want to achieve financial independence. Suddenly, impulsive spending starts to lose its appeal. Investing becomes a priority. Learning about passive income becomes important. Direction changes everything. And Carnegie deeply understood this power. He said the human mind works like a magnet. When you define a clear goal and begin working consistently toward it, your mind starts searching for opportunities related to that goal. You begin to notice things you previously overlooked. Ideas, partnerships, possibilities. But this only happens when there is clarity. Without clarity, the mind becomes scattered. And a scattered mind rarely builds wealth. Another thing Carnegie constantly repeated was that prosperity requires courage. Courage to change habits. Courage to invest in yourself. Courage to make decisions that other people may not understand. Because growing financially often means going against the common mindset. While many people spend money to appear rich, you must invest to become rich. While many seek immediate comfort, you must think long-term. While many follow the crowd, you must develop independent thinking. And this can be uncomfortable, because human beings naturally seek belonging. But Carnegie believed that anyone who wants to prosper must learn to think for themselves. Now pause for a moment and reflect. Is there something you know you should be doing to improve your financial life, but keep postponing? Maybe studying more about investments. Maybe starting a new project. Maybe developing a new skill. Maybe organizing your finances. Maybe stopping unnecessary spending. Deep down, we all know the changes we need to make. But often we avoid them because they require effort. They require discipline. They require responsibility. And this is exactly where most people remain trapped. Because while they avoid what needs to be faced, time keeps passing. Months turn into years. Years turn into decades. And before they realize it, the opportunity to build something great has already passed. Andrew Carnegie used to say that the greatest waste of life is not failure. The greatest waste is never trying with your full capacity. Because when a person truly decides to grow, something powerful happens. They begin to transform. And when a person changes their mindset, their habits, and the way they act, their reality inevitably begins to change as well. But that transformation always begins with a decision. The decision to stop avoiding what needs to be done. The decision to take control of your life. And the decision to build, step by step, the financial life you want to have. Because in the end, the most important question is not whether opportunities exist. The question is whether you are willing to become the person capable of taking advantage of them. And that answer, only you can give. And here is a truth that few people like to hear. Most people do not have an opportunity problem. They have a priority problem. Look at how many people live. They say they want to prosper. They say they want to improve their lives. They say they want to build something great. But when you look at their daily decisions, you notice something curious. Their behavior does not match their goals. Hours and hours consuming distractions. Very little time studying. Very little time developing skills. Very little time thinking strategically about the future. Andrew Carnegie observed this very clearly. He said that a person's life is the direct reflection of their priorities. Whatever you place first inevitably shapes your destiny. If comfort comes before growth, life tends to remain comfortable but limited. If discipline comes before immediate pleasure, the chances of prosperity increase dramatically. Carnegie deeply believed in something that today many people call the law of cause and effect. Nothing happens by accident. Every consequence comes from a cause. Every reality comes from decisions. Every prosperity comes from construction. This means that your financial life today is the direct result of the decisions you made in the past few years. This is not a statement meant to blame. It is a statement meant to liberate. Because if past decisions built the present, then today's decisions are building the future. And that gives you something extremely powerful back: control. Now think about something Carnegie used to teach young entrepreneurs who sought his advice. He said there are two types of people in the world: those who consume value and those who create value. Most people spend their entire lives only consuming. They consume entertainment. They consume superficial information. They consume products. They consume time. But people who prosper tend to do something different. They create. They create solutions. They create businesses. They create knowledge. They create opportunities. And the more value a person creates for others, the greater the financial reward they tend to receive. This is something extremely important to understand. Money, in essence, is an exchange of value. When you solve problems for other people, money begins to flow in your direction. When you become useful, rare, and competent, the market begins to recognize that. But to reach that point, there is a process. Learning, practicing, improving, making mistakes, adjusting, continuing. And this process requires something many people avoid: patience. We live in a time when everything seems to need to happen quickly. Fast results, fast growth, fast money. But Andrew Carnegie built one of the greatest fortunes in history through long-term vision. He invested thinking in decades. He built companies thinking in generations. He developed people thinking about the future. And that mindset completely changes the way you make decisions. When someone thinks only about the short term, the priority becomes immediate pleasure. But when someone thinks about the long term, the priority becomes building. Building knowledge, building reputation, building assets, building relationships. And all that takes time. But there is something curious about time. It passes anyway. The question is, when 5 or 10 years pass, what will have been built during that time? Many people arrive in the future exactly the same way they arrived in the present, because they changed nothing in the process. Andrew Carnegie also spoke a lot about a skill he considered fundamental for prosperity: the ability to think. It may sound simple, but it is not. Thinking deeply requires silence. It requires reflection. It requires questioning beliefs. It requires analyzing decisions. But many people live in a constant state of distraction. Phones, notifications, entertainment, noise. And in that environment, there is almost no space for strategic thinking. Carnegie used to reserve moments of the day just to think about opportunities, to think about businesses, to think about important decisions, to think about how to create more value. He believed that great ideas rarely emerge in environments of distraction. They emerge in environments of concentration. Now imagine if you started doing something simple. Every day, dedicate some time to reflect on 3 questions. What did I learn today that can improve my financial life? What did I do today that brought me closer to my goals? And what can I do better tomorrow? These questions may seem small, but when asked daily, they begin to reprogram the way you live. You stop acting on autopilot, and you begin acting with intention. And when intention combines with discipline, transformation happens. Another thing Carnegie constantly repeated was that self-confidence is built through action. Many people wait to feel confident before starting something. But the truth is that confidence comes from experience. When you begin studying more, your confidence grows. When you begin investing, your confidence grows. When you begin creating something, your confidence grows. Each small victory reinforces your belief that you are capable. And that belief completely changes the way you position yourself in life. Confident people see opportunities where others see problems. They take calculated risks. They learn from mistakes. They keep moving forward. And this creates an enormous advantage over the years. Andrew Carnegie believed that prosperity is far less about talent and far more about mindset. Talent helps. Intelligence helps. But discipline, vision, and perseverance are far more decisive, because many talented people never develop consistency. And many ordinary people build extraordinary things simply because they decided to keep moving forward. Even when it was difficult. Even when progress was slow. Even when no one was watching. And perhaps this is one of the greatest lessons Carnegie left. The visible wealth we see in successful people is almost always the result of years of invisible work. Hours of study. Years of building. Moments of doubt overcome. Difficult decisions made. Silent sacrifices. When you understand this, something changes inside you. You stop searching for shortcuts. And you begin to value the process. Because you realize that the process is exactly what builds the result. And in the end, everything returns to the starting point of this reflection. As long as you continue avoiding what needs to be faced, your life will remain exactly where it is. But the moment you decide to take responsibility, change your habits, and intentionally build your future, a new path begins to form. Maybe slow at first, maybe invisible to other people, but extremely powerful over time. Because true financial transformation never happens from the outside in. It always begins from the inside out. And when you understand this, you realize something extremely important. Financial change does not begin with money. It begins with a decision. The decision to stop living on autopilot. The decision to stop waiting for better circumstances. The decision to stop blaming the world. Andrew Carnegie said that the greatest turning point in a person's life happens at the moment they decide to take full responsibility for their own story. Not for the story that has already happened, but for the story that is yet to be built. Because the past can explain where you are, but it does not have to define where you are going. And here is something powerful. All great changes start small. One decision, a new habit, a new thought. Maybe you begin by dedicating 30 minutes a day to learning something new. Maybe you begin by organizing your finances. Maybe you begin by investing small amounts. Maybe you begin by developing a skill that can generate new opportunities. It may seem small at first, but small decisions, when repeated over time, build extraordinary results. Andrew Carnegie believed that the difference between people who prosper and those who remain stagnant rarely lies in big events. It lies in consistency. Consistency in learning. Consistency in acting. Consistency in improving. Consistency in continuing even when results have not yet appeared. Because there is something many people forget. Success rarely rewards immediate effort. It rewards accumulated effort. And when years of discipline finally meet opportunity, something remarkable happens. What once seemed impossible begins to become reality. But to get there, there is a price. The price of abandoning old habits. The price of facing discomfort. The price of growth. And the truth is that many people do not fail because they cannot pay this price. They fail because they never decide to pay it. They prefer to remain in the familiar zone, even if that familiar zone does not bring prosperity. Andrew Carnegie said that the world rewards in extraordinary ways those who become extraordinarily useful. And to become useful, you must grow. You must learn. You must develop skills. You must solve problems. You must create value. The more value you create, the more doors begin to open. And over time, your life begins to reflect that growth. But remember something fundamental. No real transformation happens overnight. It happens slowly, silently, day after day, decision after decision, until one day you look back and realize that the person you used to be no longer exists. There is a new mindset, new habits, new opportunities, a new reality. And perhaps the most important question you can ask yourself right now is this: 5 years from now, who do you want to be? The same person who keeps postponing change, or the person who decided to take control of their own life? Because time will pass anyway. The only difference is what you decide to build during that time. Andrew Carnegie believed that within every person there is extraordinary potential waiting to be developed. But that potential never appears while a person continues to avoid what needs to be done. It appears when a person decides to grow, when they decide to learn, when they decide to act, and most importantly, when they decide to continue, even when it is difficult, even when it is slow, even when no one is watching. So maybe today is the day to make a simple but powerful decision, to stop avoiding what could transform your life, and to begin step by step building the future you desire. Because in the end, a person's financial life does not change when they discover a secret. It changes when they decide to become someone capable of creating results. And that decision can begin right now. Now, tell me in the comments, what is the first change you need to make in your financial life? Writing it may seem simple, but often the first step to changing reality is having the courage to recognize the truth. And if this kind of reflection makes sense to you, keep following this channel. Because here we talk about mindset, discipline, wealth, and building an extraordinary life. Not through shortcuts, but through real growth. And always remember something Andrew Carnegie deeply believed. Wealth begins in the mind, long before it appears in the bank account.